And under the umbrella of the Qalipu, with through no fault of their own, we find it very difficult to be able to pursue the goals and objectives of our community.
Tonight, schism and division. Why some Mi'kmaq want to split from the newly recognized Qalipu First Nation.
So the fact is that if you walk away from it, you actually give it legitimacy. You give the denial legitimacy.
Dealing with denial. A Jewish perspective on Senator Lynn Beyak's downplaying of the harms of residential schools.
And I think the challenge is, how do we hold on to what we used to be, the tradition, the language.
And a trip to Taiwan, the second part of our look at the struggles of the Formosa people. Good evening, I'm Rick Harp. Our top story tonight returns us to the controversy surrounding the Qalipu Mi'kmaq First Nation in Newfoundland, a controversy that's taken yet another twist as one of its communities looks into potential separation. Here with details on the division discussion is APTN's Justin Brake.
After watching members of her community denied Indian status and membership under Qalipu Mi'kmaq First Nation, Flat Bay Chief Liz Lasaiga says she has no choice but to look at separating from the band. In a statement on Facebook, Lasaiga said, "The Qalipu enrollment process is seriously unprofessional and the membership illegitimate. I am determined to remove my people and protect their status and rights before Qalipu self-destructs, which it will."
What's going on with my application? How do I find out?
When more than 100,000 people applied to join Qalipu, Canada re-evaluated applications under more stringent rules. Roughly 80,000 were rejected. Lasaiga says it was a flawed enrollment process.
Everyone knows that we have people, especially around the Corner Brook area, who have falsified their documents, people who have made errors or exaggerated some of their work in their application.
Flat Bay Elder and former Chief Calvin White says his community can't sufficiently access programs and services or develop a sustainable economy.
And under the umbrella of the Qalipu, with through no fault of their own, we find it very difficult to be able to pursue the goals and objectives of our community.
Lasaiga said if Flat Bay splits from Qalipu, it will implement its own criteria based on a fourth-generation rule and a connection to their community.
So when you have a status card, you need to be able to know, before you use that card, know why, what it is about your background, your ancestors, your parents, what it is about the movement, why the government owes you that card. And if you don't know, I would suggest don't use it until you learn.
Chief Brendan Mitchell says Qalipu has been trying to help Flat Bay and that he's upset by Lasaiga and White's remarks.
And I absolutely find it shameful that our own people who should be helping support our situation in our province are gone off to try to help destroy what it took 5 decades and a lot of hard work and interest by a lot of people to try to bring, and that is recognition to Mi'kmaq people in Newfoundland.
But Mitchell said if the people of Flat Bay want to separate from Qalipu, he won't stand in the way. A split from Qalipu could allow people like Wade White, who hails from Flat Bay but now lives in Halifax, to gain status.
Anybody that's connected to the Flat Bay band, like myself, who is still on the Flat Bay band, would get recognition for being Native and being away.
Lasaiga and White said the Flat Bay Council will continue to research the process for separation and will not make any decisions without the consent of the community. Justin Brake, APTN National News, Halifax.
Still with politics, outcry over racist comments posted on Senator Lynn Beyak's webpage continue to dog the controversial politician. Last week, Beyak was kicked out of the Conservative caucus for refusing to remove the offensive content. The senator first made headlines back in March when she claimed residential schools offered some good to First Nations people. She's also known for urging status Indians to trade in their status cards or Canadian citizenship. Now, Beyak's conduct has prompted some of her fellow senators to approach the Senate ethics officer.
She's now posting comments that actually are insulting and hurtful and inciting hatred against a whole group of people, in this case, Indigenous peoples. And, that's not what we think is representative of what a senator should do or what the Senate as an institution should allow for. So we need to have that clarified. Is that, in fact, a breach of the Code of Ethics? And that's the first step to be taken at this point.
Now, for those disturbed by Beyak's denial of the impact of institutions like residential schools, the question before them is what to do about it. Here to share his thoughts on that question is Bernie Farber, rights advocate and former CEO of the Canadian Jewish Congress. Mr. Farber, what do you make of the controversy around the actions of Senator Lynn Beyak?
Well, basically what the senator has engaged in is a form of genocide denial. To deny the pain and the tragedy of what Indigenous people went through at residential schools is outrageous. I have no other words to describe it. And I understand the pain that residential school survivors have to feel, because I, too, come from a family who suffered a genocide. My father was the sole survivor of his small village, the sole Jewish survivor of his small village in Poland during the Holocaust. And I grew up in the shadow of the Holocaust. So I understand that pain. And I understood very much the pain afterwards when people came along and said, oh, by the way, that Holocaust of yours, it never happened, or if it did, it wasn't as bad as you thought it would be, and it was only good for... I mean, this is just absurd, but it gets even more absurd, Rick, when it's coming from the mouth of a senator of this country. And frankly, I just find that shameful.
Now, there are those who might bristle, even scoff at comparing residential schools to the Holocaust. How do you respond to them?
Well, I'm not comparing at all comparing the incidents themselves. I mean, they were both genocides of their own right, very different. But what I learned in the work that I've done over many years with First Nations and other Indigenous people is that the pain that they felt and the pain that the parents felt whose children were stolen away from them is the same kind of pain that Jews felt during the Holocaust. And so while the numbers were different and while the methods were different, they were both genocides of their own kind. And certainly that's where the similarities are, and that's where the similarities are felt.
So, Mr. Farber, if we can take lessons from dealing with denial of the Holocaust and apply them to residential schools, how might we do that?
Well, the biggest lesson that I can suggest is that you must talk about it. You must confront the people who are doing the denial. They have to be ostracized. They have to be separated from society because, in fact, the vast majority of Canadians, except for bigots and racists and anti-Indigenous types, the vast majority of Canadians now, I believe, accept the fact that we engaged in a genocide against First Nations people. And when you have somebody coming along who is in many ways a representative of the government of the nation of Canada, suggesting otherwise, suggesting that residential schools were all pretty good, I mean, we have to confront her, and we have to consistently remind Canadians that this is not the case, that residential schools was a blight on our history and was in fact, a genocide that we have to still, to this day, deal with.
Now, there is an analysis out there that the dumpster fire that is Senator Lynn Beyak in this regard, one way to deal with it is to stop giving it oxygen, to stop covering it in the media. What do you think about that?
So when I was with Canadian Jewish Congress, I heard the same argument about Ernst Zundel, who was a renowned Holocaust survivor. I had a very different opinion. I believe that you could not say, let's just walk away. In fact, I would give it oxygen as a means by which to teach lessons. Look, as far as I was concerned, when Ernst Zundel passed away, which he did a number of months ago, and if on his tombstone it read, "Here lies Canada's greatest liar," I could accept that. So the fact is that if you walk away from it, you actually give it legitimacy. You give the denial legitimacy. You must confront it, and you must explain to Canadians over and over again the fallacy of these arguments, in my view.
Mr. Farber, we appreciate your insights.
Thank you very much, Rick.
Time for your first weather outlook and a quick break. When we come back, a mother in urgent need of an organ transplant faces some troubling odds. Stay tuned. We have a pair of sunny -7s in Fredericton and Halifax. In Ukjuak, a snowy -22, Happy Valley Goose Bay, a cloudy 15. Val-d'Or -3 in clouds, Sept-Îles -14 in sun. Windsor, cloudy 5, Ottawa -5 and cloudy. Big Trout Lake, snow -13, Sudbury -1 in clouds, Churchill -32, cloudy, The Paw cloudy -22. Brandon -11 and cloudy, Barons River, snow and -3. Swift Current, mostly cloudy, -18, Yorkton, the same. Uranium City, -29 and sunny, Meadow Lake, partly cloudy, -21. And welcome back to APTN National News. We begin this part of the newscast in Alberta, where yesterday a Lethbridge man on trial for a 2015 triple homicide pled guilty. APTN's Tamara Pimentel now on the sentence handed down today to 24-year-old Austin Viel.
For the family of the victims, the nightmare of the past 2.5 years has come to an end. Today in court, Austin Viel was handed a life sentence with no chance of parole for 20 years.
It's a big relief. I'm really glad that it's going to be done in one day, but it still doesn't change anything.
In April of 2015, Viel was charged with 3 counts of second-degree murder in the deaths of Kyle Devine, Clarissa English, and her brother, Dakota English. What was supposed to be a month-long trial started on Monday, but as court began, Viel pled guilty to 3 counts of second-degree murder. Viel knew all of the victims, and it isn't known exactly what happened, but the 3 were found stabbed to death in their Lethbridge home. Court heard Kyle Devine received 84 cuts and stab wounds to his neck, face, head, and body. Dakota English had 57, and Clarissa suffered 130 wounds. 5 knives and a meat cleaver were found at the crime scene, and blood-stained clothing was found in Viel's home. DNA testing matched the blood of the victims. All 3 victims were heavily intoxicated, as well as Viel. He says he has no recollection of what happened.
I looked at him straight in the eyes, and he had a blank stare. He had no remorse. He had a blank stare on his face.
Were you hoping for something different from him?
A reaction, at least. You know, like I know I'm never going to get an apology. My family's never going to get an apology, but, you know, some kind of remorse.
I guess we're just all anxious to move on, but I know it will, you know, they say closure. I don't know if there'll ever be a closure.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
Time could be running out for Sammy Murdoch. The mother of 2 young children from Prince George, BC, is in desperate need of a new kidney. But as APTN's Tina House explains, finding a match will prove a challenge.
Sammy Murdoch is a 35-year-old mother of 2 and has dealt with some serious health issues since she was 16.
They told me my kidney scarred and it was failing, and I didn't even know anything about what was going on because I was just young.
5 years later, she was given a kidney by an anonymous donor. However, in 2012, she was given more devastating news. Her body was starting to reject that kidney, and she needed a second transplant. She has also had part of her colon removed because of cancer. For the last 5 years, she has had to endure dialysis 3 times a week for 3 hours a session.
Anything past 2.5 hours to 3 hours, then I get these massive headaches. I always have high blood pressure, no matter what, like every day. I'm on blood pressure meds and everything. But yeah, I feel really weak, and yeah, just really high blood pressure causes all the headaches and that.
The challenge for Sammy to find a donor is that she has a rare blood type. Although she's on the kidney transplant list, Her boyfriend of 17 years, who's always by her side, has even put an ad on the back window of his truck, hoping that someone might come forward to give Sammy the gift of life. And although it's been difficult for Sammy raising her kids, going to school to get her upgrading, and going to dialysis, she's hopeful that someone will come forward, and she has a dream.
The one thing I really wanted to do was take a trip for my family to like Disneyland for my kids. I can't go because of my medical, because of my dialysis, so that's what we were aiming for, so that probably would be my wish besides my transplant.
Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
Our second weather outlook is on deck, followed by a short commercial break. Still ahead, part 2 of our visit to Taiwan and the conditions facing the Formosa people. Please stay tuned. High level, sunny, -24. Grand Prairie, -21, mostly cloudy. Calgary, -19, mostly cloudy. Edmonton, -20, mostly cloudy. Tofino, 6 and rain. Kamloops, 1 and cloud. Fort Nelson, a sunny -24. Sandspit, rain and 5. Old Crow, sunny -35. Watson Lake, a cloudy -31. Wrigley, -33 and sun. Fort Resolution, -30 and sun. Colville Lake, -35 and sun. Sax Harbor, a sunny -27. Baker Lake, clouds and -29. Same for Cambridge Bay. Igloolik, -21, partly cloudy. Resolute, a sunny -33. And welcome back. Indigenous peoples in what is now Taiwan have faced wave after wave of colonialism from multiple sources, yet they've still maintained their cultures and languages. In this encore presentation, APTN's Tom Fenario looks at the persevering spirit of the people of Formosa.
This Bayan man is proclaiming victory. A traditional ceremony, this prideful performance usually occurs after a battle is won. But in this instance, it's a part of the opening ceremonies of the 2017 International Austronesian Conference. The gathering brings together Indigenous people from Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand, as well as one Abenaki from the Odanak First Nation in Quebec.
As I've gone around the world over these past 15 years, meeting with other Indigenous peoples in various situations, what is astounding is the similarity of our experiences.
I also want to acknowledge that I am on Indigenous territory.
As CEO of APTN, Jean LaRose was invited here to speak on a media panel. One issue raised that struck a chord with him, the race to save Taiwan's Indigenous languages from extinction.
While they haven't had a residential school experience per se, they have been integrated and forced into a mainstream education system that is not at all friendly to their languages. And most of them have communities that have as few language speakers as we do in Canada.
Taiwan has a population of about 23 million and growing, on an island smaller than Nova Scotia. The 16 recognized Indigenous tribes make up 2.3% of the population, about 530,000 people. The risk of being assimilated into larger Chinese culture is very real.
The longer we wait to really save our language, the more people move to urban area, the more Indigenous peoples are connected with modernity. They, of course, during this course of time, they change. And I think the challenge is how do we hold on to what we used to be, the tradition, the language.
Yera Palama is the CEO of the foundation that runs Taiwan Indigenous Television, known as TITV. Since 2005, they've been producing news and award-winning programming in Indigenous languages, and recently launched a radio station. While Palama is clearly proud of their work, she says it's getting harder to staff her programs with language speakers.
How do we maintain our identity as an ethnic media if we do not know enough about ourselves?
There appears to be some help on the way. Itchian Palush is the Minister of the Council of Indigenous Peoples, the arm of the government that deals with Indigenous issues. Palush, who is a part of the Amis tribe, says that a recently passed law will promote Indigenous languages.
We have been dedicating to the promoting of this bill of the Indigenous language development for 12 years, and it was finally passed in the legislature this year. And it is very important that in this bill, the Indigenous languages are confirmed to be the national languages of Taiwan.
The act will ask townships with significant Indigenous populations to write all official documentation in their language, as well as Chinese, including road signs. The government also stepped up to help fund language centers like this one. These children are singing in the Piniu Mayan language. While this is certainly encouraging, it might not be enough. People here say the language could be extinct in 20 to 30 years. Tohima Tugal is a Piniu Mayan journalist and activist. She says the government needs to cut red tape that gets in the way of language development. One example she gives, her community of Kasavakan would like a traditional daycare where elders take care of kids and speak the language to them. But they can't, because the elders need childcare licenses to work at a daycare.
Either lose the regulation or try to find a way so our elders, our own people, can take care of our own children and to have this environment for them to talk our languages on a daily life basis.
Togal also says government regulations interfere with other cultural practices, like hunting.
In the law, they say the indigenous peoples are allowed to hunt only for ceremonies, only for certain occasions. So we have to apply for it. So before we go hunting, we'll have to fill up an application and tell them, okay, how many deers we will get, how many pigs we will get, but who knows? Because it's not something that we will go for like, okay, 5 deers, then 5 deers. It's something given by our ancestors.
Regulations aside, the Piniu Mayan community of Kasavakan is doing its best to take language and culture preservation into its own hands. Hereditary Chief Hakudu Malades picked up carving at the age of 48 in order to promote culture. Now his carvings depicting everyday Piniu Mayan life and legends decorate the village.
当然，我们身为一个原住民，当然也要找回我们自己，祖灵的这个尊严。哦，我希望大家能够守住自己的文化，永远的去追视我们的祖先，让我们的子子孙孙。
With language revitalization and youth taking back traditional hunting practices, it would appear that many here want to follow their ancestors.
What really struck me here, as is striking us in Canada now, is the encouragement and the positive sense that a lot of young people have that it can be recaptured.
The Bayan ceremony is calling the animals to the guns of the men. In essence, they're asking for a bountiful hunt. But back then, instead of asking for permits from the government, they were requesting guidance from their ancestors. Now more than ever, it would appear that the indigenous peoples of Formosa will continue to take that approach. Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Taiwan.
Well, that's it for APTN National News this January 9th, 2018. On behalf of everyone behind and in front of the camera, thanks for watching. And remember, for news anytime, day or night, you can always visit aptnnews.ca. I'm Rick Harp. Have a good night.